Welcome to the Sensory Support Service training on deaf, hearing impairment and emotional wellbeing. I'm Megan Williams and I'm one of the teachers of the deaf in the sensory and physical support team in Peterborough. This is one of a series of training modules compiled by the sensory support team. You may wish to look at the other modules for further information on deafness and hearing impairment. Please feel free to pause the video at any time to discuss the issues raised. So the outcomes from this session. You will have a better understanding of the social and emotional impact of deafness, the importance of inclusive environments, the importance of preparing the deaf or hearing impaired learner for adulthood, and crucially, how to support them to become more independent. Just a few things to consider before we start. Spoken conversation is everywhere and occurs constantly 24/7. It's a hearing world. It's the world in which we all have to operate. But this is something that is obviously difficult for people with a hearing impairment. And often deaf or hearing impaired people will talk of a glass wall which blocks their access and inclusion in everyday conversations. Having a hearing impairment is recognised as a disability, but this can have negative connotations. It implies what you can't do. Researchers, Oliver and Barnes, talk of societal stigma, that society in general views disabilities negatively, which then can restrict the lives of people that have those disabilities. And a hearing impaired pupil is different. They have hearing loss and they feel different. They look different if they're using sensory aids, such as cochlear implants or hearing aids, or a bone anchored aid. And quite often they are the only person in their class, or their year, or even their school who has a hearing loss. Oliver described them as solitaires, which encapsulates the feeling of loneliness and isolation that so many hearing impaired pupils feel. If you think about it, we all have a natural inclination to want the company of those like us. These are the people that we tend to relate to best. And they're generally the people we can truly relax with, be ourselves, and build deeper friendships with. But this is just not available for so many deaf pupils in mainstream education. And relationships are such a vital part of everybody's well-being. We can see that with the recent pandemic and how much it has impacted on everyone's feeling of connection and general emotional health when they've not been able to see family and friends. Social relationships have a powerful effect on self-concept, well-being, and our quality of life. Imagine for a minute that you are able to go away on holiday and go to a country where you don't speak the language, perhaps China. Maybe you've had that experience already. Think about how it will feel to not be able to understand other people. What would you try and do to communicate? Pause the video and discuss this with the person sat near you. Think of 3 words that would best describe how you would feel. And try to think of strategies you would use to try to overcome this. So how would you feel? Perhaps confused, frustrated, embarrassed or angry. Might be fed up, tired, emotional, feel a bit awkward and isolated, and frightened, perhaps lonely or anxious, bored, feel different and stupid. They're all negative emotions. And what strategies did you think of? Did you think of the classic British response of shouting louder? Really, would you? Or would you persevere? But realistically, for how long? How tiring is it to keep trying to communicate when you can't understand anything but the most basic words? Perhaps you would try to rely on someone else who speaks both languages and let them be your voice. and be dependent on them, making an accurate translation without missing out key information, and feel really confident that you could totally trust them? Or would you get frustrated and give up and not even try and engage? Either way, it's hard work, tiring, and demoralising. And at best, the communication would be, the most simple of keywords, and you wouldn't be likely to develop any deeper conversations. And think about if it was an emergency. Think how agitated in addition you'd be. And remember, at least you're on holiday and can come home again. Incidental learning in the curriculum is what is learned indirectly, almost accidentally. It's in addition to what is being formally taught during the lesson, and can be, for example, through overhearing the comments of other pupils. Now, hearing impaired pupils are much more likely to miss out on these opportunities. Hearing aids are often not good at picking up sound coming from different directions. So this means they are likely to not fully hear or not hear at all the contribution of others. This could be the answer to questions, but it could be the little asides, banter, slang and expressions that young people use that we as adults don't. Again, it's very isolating to miss out on this and learning these words. Deaf pupils need to be able to hear other pupils make mistakes and realise that this is common and all part of learning. This may then give them the confidence to make mistakes themselves. In addition, due to their hearing loss, many pupils will have acquired their language later than their peers, and so their communication skills are likely to have been delayed, which will have an impact on how well they can access what is being taught. Background noise and large groups make it particularly difficult for hearing impaired pupils to be able to understand what is being said. And it may well be that the deaf child is accused of daydreaming, selective hearing, or being inattentive. But this could be because it's so difficult to hear and requires so much effort to concentrate for a long time if there's a lot of spoken content. It may well be that the hearing impaired learner feels insecure and lacks confidence. It's also exhausting to have to be self-advocating all the time, to ask for subtitles to be put on. Can I sit near the front, please? Or could you mute the radio aid, please, when you're not talking to me directly? Dormany found that deaf learners tend to do a cost analysis of energy throughout the day. Is it worth putting up my hand to ask for clarification of what's been just said? No, not if I haven't understood the rest of the lesson and I don't really know what to ask. It's embarrassing. It's going to show me up. And I just don't do it. And if you think of the ongoing effect of missing out on key snippets of information and how learning is built on these key pieces of knowledge, and if you've missed out on that and got gaps in your knowledge, that is debilitating and has an ongoing effect on your self-esteem and self-confidence. The hearing impaired learner is also likely to miss out on the incidental learning that goes on socially as well. It's estimated that up to 80% of information is acquired incidentally. Perhaps think of sitting in a cafe or the staff room, and it's perfectly possible to find out all about a film you've never seen just by overhearing someone else's conversation. Click on the link to watch the video to see how frustrating and isolating it can be for deaf young people in social situations. We heard earlier that for many deaf learners, they are the only person in their year group or school who have a hearing loss. They haven't got other youngsters like them to look up to. We all need role models, and they need to be someone we can relate to. The hearing impaired learner may have an aspiration to do something in the future, amazing, but if it appears that no deaf person is already doing this, it's harder to think about your dreams and believe that you can actually achieve them. Role models play a significant part in young people's lives. In fact, we all need role models as an example and also to motivate to improve ourselves and reach our true potential. And for most deaf youngsters, they simply don't have this. In a wider context, how many deaf celebrities can you think of? Another social impact of deafness is how vulnerable deaf listeners often are. They're vulnerable because they don't hear everything their peers do, either as clearly or as quickly, particularly if they're in a noisy environment, such as the school corridor or lunch hall. They're vulnerable to being victimised, possibly teased because they look different with their cochlear implants or hearing aids, excluded out of thoughtlessness by their peers and nobody bothering to make that extra tiny bit of effort to include them. They may be being bullied. As we know, bullying can stem from negative peer relationships. We need to teach peers from a young age kindness, that we're not all the same, and for example, that a deaf child might take longer to respond to an invitation to play, especially in the playground where it's difficult to hear, but just to give them that little bit more time. Just as with the curriculum, this missing out of information being exchanged and loss of connections every day is profound. Often the hearing impaired youngster feels marginalised on the periphery of social groups as they bond together and build their friendships. Does anyone work part-time? Do you sometimes feel that you've missed out on a key piece of information, or perhaps a good bit of gossip, that was said on your day off? Deaf children and young people are missing out on social interaction and conversation, opportunities to develop their social network. This chillax time when friendships really develop. Think of a deaf child that you know. Where, when and who do they chillax with? Young people like to have their chats by the lockers, the lunch halls where adults aren't, but these are noisy areas. So again, the deaf pupil is frequently missing out on these opportunities to build friendships. As a consequence, it's much harder to develop real, deeper friendships. Research by Ramsey has found that most of the interactions between a deaf child and their hearing peer is around the giving of directives. For example, a hearing pupil telling the hearing impaired pupil, "Oh, the teacher said turn to page 20. Now this is helpful and kind, but is not a reciprocal relationship, which is how friendships are built. You know, the sharing of jokes and experiences and interests, and that's often missing. All children have a right to meaningful access to inclusive education. As teachers and support staff, we all appreciate how important it is to promote inclusive practices. All the staff, including lunchtime supervisors and the caretaker, need to use deaf awareness strategies. Click on the NDCS link to see what young people say they find difficult, especially at lunchtime. And are we inclusive in how we set out the classroom? Do we consider how best a hearing impaired pupil can access group work through perhaps creating a chairperson to ensure that only one person speaks at a time? Do we make sure everyone has equal status? Try to ensure that pupils engage in cooperative activities. Think about who you put a deaf child with in a group. Consider keeping the same groups so that a relationship builds up and potentially friendships. We want to do more than just help children to accept each other's differences. And there are some excellent resources that can help with making peers more aware. For younger children, Freddie and the Fairy is brilliant at teaching 3 golden rules of deaf awareness. And older pupils may benefit from interventions by Healthy Minds or Smile Therapy, both of which can be run in groups with hearing impaired and hearing pupils together. If you're interested in finding out more about these, please contact the Sensory Support Service or your child's teacher of the deaf. And physical activity plays an important role in all young people's emotional well-being. We know that. We know it can be a therapeutic space to get out frustrations. And younger hearing impaired children like games such as tag that have very clear rules and do not need, the same level of verbal communication. And hearing impaired children often like the single sports such as cycling, bike riding, swimming, ballet, gymnastics, because it gives them this therapeutic space as well as a way to express themselves, but again, there's not a need for much verbal communication. And perhaps, wherever possible, try to include these activities in some way in your setting, if you don't already. maybe as a club, so that deaf child is included in something they're confident in, and as well it may be something that they excel at, which again would be good for their self-confidence and self-esteem. And as an adult, be a positive role model to the other pupils. Go out of your way to talk to the hearing impaired child regularly. Demonstrate how to give them more time to process your questions, and never say it doesn't matter if they've not heard the first time. What are their hobbies and interests? Do they like to be referred to as deaf or hearing impaired? But most importantly, try to ask them regularly, subtly, but how is it for you socially? Find out, because the negative experiences can then lead to them avoiding situations, and that causes a downward cycle of them feeling stigmatized from society because of the lack of understanding, and then they feel excluded and lonely. Help them to be an advocate for change as well. And regularly ask yourself as a staff, is the hearing impaired child's access to inclusive education meaningful for them, or is it just a bit of a tick box? Is diversity encouraged? If the hearing impaired child continues to receive messages that sort of reinforce the differences and exclusion, they're clearly less likely to build up self-confidence and strong identities. A part of our role is to help young people prepare for the future. Deaf young people need to be able to manage and thrive in a hearing world. Like everyone else, they have the right to a fulfilling and happy life, and we need to help them to become as independent as possible. The Personal Understanding of Deafness programme is a curriculum which has been developed to support a deaf child build up independence in different areas, including the maintenance of their aids, advocating for their needs, and also preparing for adulthood. Again, their teacher of the deaf can provide more information about this. Well, as you can see, the statistics regarding adults and emotional health are concerning. To sum up, they're less likely to have a job and more likely to have a mental health problem. So most importantly, what can we do about this then? We want to make sure that all our pupils are emotionally healthy, feeling confident and relaxed, because this is the best state to be able to learn in. It's really key that you do spend the time to understand the child's hearing loss. Each child's hearing loss will be different. And do you know whether it's mild, unilateral, conductive, high frequency, etc.? And the impact this has for the young person. Where do they need to sit? Do they have a radio aid? Do they know how to use the radio aid? Do you know how to use it correctly? And if not, ask them, find out together. But be aware of basic strategies, that you can use to help, such as not writing on the board and talking at the same time, as you probably have your back to them. And most deaf people rely on lip reading as well as their hearing aids or cochlear implants. You may want to watch the sensory support module on adapting teaching and learning for children and young people with a hearing loss to gain further information about knowledge of deaf strategies. Consider a social skills group or starting a club based on an activity the deaf child enjoys. Outdoor activities where team building and problem solving skills are developed are brilliant for all young people's emotional resilience. And if you invite other pupils to join these activities, this may provide the opportunity to develop friendships through that sharing of activities and experiences. A buddy system can work really well. Or when the hearing impaired learner is older, could they perhaps be a mentor for a younger pupil? And this will give an opportunity to build their self-esteem and sense of belonging. And try to build allies for the hearing impaired child who will work with them and speak up for the marginalised. School councils are great for doing this sort of thing, and perhaps there could be a whole school effort to learn the signs to a popular song. It's vital that we have high expectations. And 40% of hearing impaired pupils do have additional needs, but then that means 60%, the majority, do not. So they should be achieving at the same level as their peers, but data shows that they frequently aren't. They are in the disability category of SEND, by having a hearing loss, but not special educational needs. And so we need to be thinking of ways of challenging them and raising their aspirations so they do achieve their full potential. They need to develop independence, both to manage their equipment, but also work independently in class. And self-advocacy is important for us all. And it does take energy, but we need to give them the confidence and language to speak up for themselves and to be able to express and find the support they need if, for example, they want to learn to drive or go on and do further study. And regarding their emotional well-being, they need the language to be able to recognise when they're struggling and how to ask for help. So to conclude, our aim should be to encourage the hearing impaired learner to view themselves positively, to help them build up resilience and friendships so they are more able to cope with challenges both now and in the future, so they too can reach for their dreams. You might like to write down 2 things as an individual you will try to do to support the deaf young people you know and their emotional well-being. There are some suggested resources on the following slide that you may find useful in the future, or please do contact the sensory support team if you would like to find out more about deaf and hearing impaired pupils and their social emotional health. Thank you for listening today.